When a young girl risks everything to save a dying German Shepherd at a heartless auction, no one expects what will happen next. Witness how her act of courage gives the German Shepherd a second chance at life, and how their bond inspires an entire community to believe in hope, healing, and love. This unforgettable German Shepherd story will touch your soul and restore your faith in kindness. Love real rescue stories and amazing German Shepherd moments. Subscribe now for more true tales of courage, compassion, and second chances. Thunder cracked above Willow Creek County Fairgrounds, rattling the tin roof and bouncing off the broken-down rides long since abandoned to rust and weeds. Emily Carter, 15, soaked to the skin, barely taller than the auction table, stood clutching a battered leather wallet with her whole life savings inside. She could barely feel her fingers, but that wasn't just from the cold. Neon lights sputtered above the muddy pen, casting a sickly green haze over the crowd. Most folks here were farmers in worn boots and older men who smelled like tobacco and diesel, trading sidelong glances already half-turned toward the exit. The animal auction was nearly done. 1 goat, a crate of chickens, an old mule. No one cared. The last animal staggered through the gate, his ribs sharp as fence posts under a coat the color of dirty snow. The German Shepherd, if you could even call him that anymore, moved like a shadow across the hay. Fleas dotted his belly, scars cut through his fur, and one ear flopped over, half-healed from some long-ago injury. But it was his eyes that stopped Emily, dark, glassy, haunted. He barely looked at the crowd, except for one trembling second when his gaze locked with hers. The auctioneer's voice boomed. "Final animal tonight. Looks like we got ourselves a stray, folks. Opening bid?" Nobody answered. A woman with a clipboard muttered, "Just send him to the pound." Someone else laughed. "Ain't worth the dog food to keep him alive." Emily's heart hammered. She remembered Mom's voice. "We barely have enough for groceries this week, Em. Please, just come home." She looked at the dog who stood shivering, not from rain but from some kind of trust so long broken it hurt just to watch. Her little brother Ethan tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Don't, Em. He looks scary." Emily couldn't speak. She just squeezed the wallet, feeling the shape of every crumpled bill. Her mind raced. If she did this, what would they eat? Would Mom hate her for bringing home another mouth to feed? The crowd's muttering grew louder. 30 seconds or he's off to animal control, barked the auctioneer, banging his gavel. "Anyone? $10? 5? Emily's throat tightened. Atlas, the name came from nowhere, looked down, head low. But as the seconds ticked, he glanced up, a question behind those eyes. Was there any hope left in this place? Emily couldn't stop herself. $23, all I have. Her voice cracked over the thunder. The auctioneer stared, almost annoyed. "Sold, I guess." He shrugged, turning away. "Take him, kid. Good luck." The crowd had already started to leave, boots sucking at the mud. Emily didn't notice. She just stood frozen, heart thundering, as the dog limped over. Up close, Atlas smelled of old rain, fear, and something she couldn't name, a desperate need to trust. He stopped a foot away, and for a long moment, neither moved. "You're safe now," Emily whispered, barely above the sound of the rain. Atlas cocked his head, uncertain, but his tail flickered, just once, a flicker of hope. They walked away together, leaving the fairground lights and laughter behind. The storm still raged, but Emily didn't care. She looked down at Atlas, his fur plastered to his sides, each breath ragged but alive. He glanced up, meeting her eyes again, and for the first time, there was something new there, a tiny flame refusing to go out. She knew it was crazy, she knew it was dangerous, maybe even selfish, but she also knew, just as surely as she knew her own name, that she couldn't let this dog slip away, not tonight. As they made their way down the slick, empty road toward the trailer park on the edge of town, Emily's mind spun with questions. Why did she feel so drawn to this broken dog? Was it pity, or was it something darker, a longing to fix what no one else wanted? She thought about her mom's warnings, about Ethan's frightened eyes, about the weeks when the fridge was nearly empty, but with every step she clung to one stubborn hope, that maybe, just maybe, saving Atlas could save a piece of herself, too. The rain eased as they crossed under a flickering streetlight. Emily looked down at Atlas, and for the briefest moment saw not a stray, but a survivor. Someone who, like her, had every reason to give up, but hadn't. Behind them, the fairground faded into darkness, thunder rolling away. Emily squeezed the empty wallet in her pocket and set her jaw. Whatever happened next, she and Atlas would face it together. And as they disappeared into the night, neither knew that this would be the first step in a story that would change not only their own lives, but the hearts of an entire town. Emily trudged through the rain-soaked streets, boots squelching with every step, Atlas limping quietly by her side. The town was almost asleep, but neon signs still buzzed above puddles, casting warped reflections that shimmered around them. Cheap cigarettes, open 24 hours, Lucky's Diner. Each light seemed to taunt her with what she didn't have: comfort, certainty, an easy place to belong. Her breath steamed in the night air. Atlas shivered, drawing closer every time a car rushed past, headlights flaring across his scarred body. Emily reached out, letting her fingers brush his damp fur. He flinched but didn't pull away. Rainwater streamed from his muzzle, dripping onto the cracked sidewalk. By the time they reached the edge of Willow Creek, Emily was so tired her legs ached. The Carter family trailer sat hunched under a lone street lamp, the paint peeling, one window patched with cardboard. Through the blinds, she could see the flickering blue light of the TV, the shape of Ethan curled on the sagging couch. Her mother's chair, as always, stood empty. "Home," Emily whispered, as much to herself as to Atlas. She held her breath, praying her mom wouldn't be home yet. Maybe she'd be closing up at the diner or cleaning offices on Main. Anything but sitting at the kitchen table, face pinched with worry. Atlas hesitated at the porch. Emily gave him space, unlocking the door with hands that shook. "It's okay," she murmured, trying to sound braver than she felt. "You're with me now." Atlas stepped inside, nails clicking on the linoleum, sniffing the air with nervous urgency. The living room was small, cluttered, Ethan's action figures scattered under the coffee table, a stack of unpaid bills rubber-banded on the kitchen counter. Emily towed off her muddy shoes and grabbed a threadbare towel from the bathroom, dropping it in front of the space heater. Atlas eyed the heater warily, then, after a long moment, curled up beside it. His body was so thin it seemed to melt into the floor. Emily knelt, using the towel to gently wipe his fur. Dried blood crusted one of his paws, and there were old, pink scars tracking across his belly. Her hands trembled as she dabbed at them. She remembered what her father used to say when a stray wandered onto their old farm. "You have to be patient with hurt things. They bite because they're scared, not mean." Her father was gone now, but the words stuck. Atlas didn't bite. He barely even looked at her, except to track her movements with one wary amber eye. His breathing slowed as the heat seeped into his bones. The front door banged open. Emily's heart jumped as Ethan came in, rain dripping from his sleeves. He froze when he saw Atlas, eyes wide. "What's that?" he squeaked, voice thin with fear. Emily swallowed. "He's a friend. His name's Atlas." Ethan backed up against the wall, staring at the dog. "He looks like a monster." "He's not," Emily said, her voice gentle. She reached out and touched Atlas's ear. The dog barely reacted, but Ethan shook his head, refusing to come closer. The TV's blue light danced over Atlas's battered body, making his scars seem deeper, more monstrous. The phone rang. Emily's mother. Her voice was sharp, tired, crackling over the line. "Emily, please tell me you're not bringing trouble home tonight." "I can't take it, not with everything else." Emily glanced at Atlas, at Ethan's fearful face, at the stacks of bills. Guilt clawed at her. She tried to sound steady. "It's just me and Ethan, Mom. We're fine." She hung up quickly, heart pounding. She thought about what she'd just done. Another mouth to feed when they barely scraped by. Another risk when her mom's temper was already fraying at the edges. She wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Emily's chest tightened. Had she doomed them all just because she couldn't walk away? But when she looked at Atlas, she saw no threat, only exhaustion. A dog too tired to fight anymore. She rummaged through the cabinets and found a can of soup, spooning out a small portion into an old plastic bowl. "Here." she said softly. You have to eat something. Atlas sniffed it, then lay his head down, uninterested. She didn't push. As the night deepened, Emily changed into dry clothes and made a little nest for herself on the floor beside Atlas, wrapping herself in an old blanket. She couldn't leave him alone, not on his first night. Ethan lingered nearby, pretending not to watch, his toy truck clutched tight in his fist. Lightning flashed outside, thunder rolling across the fields. Atlas flinched, then tucked his nose under Emily's arm. She felt a strange comfort in his trust, small as it was. Don't worry, she whispered, unsure if she was speaking to him or herself. You're safe now. I'll figure it out. I always do. Ethan stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the hallway light. Is he going to stay? He asked, voice wavering. Emily nodded, more certain than she felt. Yeah, he's one of us now. The TV flickered, dishes clinked in the sink as the fridge hummed on. It wasn't much, but it was home, a place for broken things to rest. Atlas, for the first time, closed his eyes without shivering. Slowly, carefully, he let his head drop onto Emily's arm. His body was still tense, but there was something like gratitude in his silence. Emily felt it too, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could keep this dog safe. That maybe she could save something in herself along the way. As she drifted into sleep, the storm moved on, leaving behind only the soft hush of rain against the trailer roof, and the promise that broken souls can find their way home, even on the hardest nights. Morning sunlight crept through the slats of broken blinds, tracing pale stripes across the Carter trailer's battered floor. Emily woke with a jolt, heart thudding, confused for a moment by the soft weight against her side. Atlas was curled into a tight ball, shivering despite the warmth of the space heater. His paws twitched in the throes of a nightmare, legs pumping weakly, as if running from something only he could see. Emily reached out, hesitated, then let her hand hover just above his fur. She'd always thought her own nightmares were private things, but watching Atlas struggle in his sleep, she felt the old ache rising in her chest. She knew what it was to run in circles behind closed eyes, never quite escaping the past. She sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Ethan's snores came from the couch, his face half buried in a pillow. The kitchen was heavy with the hush of morning, the only sound the steady hum of the fridge and the drip of last night's rain from the eaves. Emily tiptoed to the counter, opening the bread box. She took a crusty slice and broke it in half, offering it to Atlas. Hey, buddy, she whispered, inching closer. You hungry? Atlas flinched at the sound, eyeing the bread warily. Every muscle in his body was tense, as if he expected the slightest movement to bring pain. Emily settled on the linoleum, legs crossed, holding the bread between them. Atlas wouldn't take the food, not unless she sat perfectly still, her posture open and non-threatening. So Emily waited, feeling every second stretch out long and thin. She didn't rush him, didn't reach out, just let him watch her until at last his nose twitched and he inched forward. His tongue flicked, snatching the bread from her palm. He wolfed it down, licking crumbs from the floor, but when Emily shifted to pet him, he jerked away, retreating to the heater. Emily's hands shook as she reached for her journal, a battered composition notebook she kept hidden under the couch. On the first page, she wrote, "What happened to him?" She sketched a rough outline of Atlas's face, noting the scars, the way his eyes never seemed to rest. She wondered what kinds of wounds could make a dog so wary, so raw with old pain. She traced the questions with her pen, wishing she had answers. A faint noise behind her, Ethan, rubbing his eyes, shuffled into the kitchen. He dropped into a chair, yawning. For a moment, brother and sister sat in the golden quiet, the only movement Atlas's side rising and falling as he caught his breath. Ethan spoke first, his voice low. He still looked scary. He didn't look at Emily, just fiddled with a frayed shoelace. You have nightmares too, you know. Emily stiffened. What are you talking about? Sometimes you cry in your sleep. Since Dad left. I hear you. Ethan's voice was flat, not accusing, just stating the truth as only a little brother could. You and the dog, both jumpy, both kinda lost. Emily opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. She couldn't deny it, not when her own body remembered all the times she'd woken in the night, heart pounding, reaching for someone who was never coming back. She watched Atlas, who'd settled again but kept one eye fixed on the kitchen door. "Maybe he just needs time," she said, mostly to herself. "Maybe you do, too," Ethan replied, surprising her. He stood, poured himself cereal, and left the kitchen as quietly as he'd entered. Emily turned back to her journal. She wrote, "We're both carrying stuff no one else can see." She drew a scar on Atlas's ear, then traced her own reflection in the toaster, shadows under her eyes, hair tangled, jaw set with worry. The day drifted by in small rituals, Emily feeding Atlas scraps, Ethan dropping his backpack by the door, the TV droning in the background. Atlas refused to leave Emily's side but startled every time she coughed or made a sudden move. If anyone knocked at the door, he vanished behind the couch, eyes wide and wild. That afternoon, Emily sat on the porch steps, Atlas beside her. She watched the neighbor kids play basketball, their laughter drifting over the cracked pavement. Atlas stared straight ahead, ears drooping. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance. Atlas stiffened, then pressed closer to Emily, as if seeking shelter. She tried again to reach for him. This time her fingers brushed his scarred ear, soft, tentative. Atlas flinched, then stilled. For a heartbeat, he let her touch him. Emily felt her own breath hitch, the moment so delicate she was afraid to move. Tiny progress, but it felt like hope. The sun slipped behind the clouds. Emily sat in the growing dusk, her journal on her knees. She wrote, "We're both still here. That has to count for something." That night, as Emily curled up on her mattress, Atlas crept over, silent as a secret. He circled 3 times, then lay down just close enough that their shoulders touched. He didn't sleep easy, but he stayed. Emily stared at the ceiling, listening to Atlas's uneven breathing, the distant whistle of a train, and Ethan's soft snores. She wondered if either of them would ever stop running from the things they couldn't say out loud. For the first time in months, Emily didn't wake from a nightmare. Instead, she drifted into sleep with Atlas's warmth at her side, and the smallest sense that maybe, just maybe, they were both a little less invisible than before. Emily's Monday began like most others, her alarm chirping before the sun even thought about rising, the chill of the trailer biting at her feet as she rolled off her mattress. But something felt different as she quietly tiptoed past Atlas, still curled in a tight circle, chest rising and falling in slow, shallow breaths. She paused, watching his eyelids flicker with dreams she couldn't guess, then grabbed her backpack and stepped into the gray dawn. Willow Creek High School was only 3 blocks away, but every morning felt like an uphill climb. Emily hunched her shoulders as she crossed the cracked asphalt, hoping no one would notice the thrift store jacket, the scuffed sneakers, or the exhaustion heavy in her bones. But whispers trailed her down the hall anyway, snickers, muttered rumors. She tried to ignore them. She'd gotten good at shrinking herself, sliding through the day invisible, but ever since she brought Atlas home, things had changed. It started with a photo, a blurry shot of Atlas at the fairgrounds, his scars clear even in the low light. Now her classmates had a new nickname for her dog, Frankenstein. At lunch, Emily sat alone on the bench near the fence, picking at a peanut butter sandwich. She caught pieces of conversation drifting over from the next table. "Did you see that thing she brought home? Looks like a zombie dog. Probably has rabies. She's just as weird as her mutt." Emily's jaw clenched, her hands curling into fists. She looked down, studying the rough patch on her backpack where the fabric had worn thin. When she finally bit into her sandwich, a shadow fell across the table. "Hey, Carter!" It was Billy, taller than everyone else in their grade, with a permanent smirk. He nudged her tray with his boot, sending it tumbling to the ground. The sandwich landed in a puddle of chocolate milk. Laughter burst out around her. Emily kept her face blank, but inside she burned. She forced herself not to react, not to give them the satisfaction. Instead, she knelt, picking up her lunch, hands shaking with something that wasn't just embarrassment. After the last bell rang, Emily trudged back through the drizzle, her mind replaying every laugh and sneer. As she neared the corner by the playground, she spotted a familiar shape waiting by the fence. Atlas, head low, tail thumping the moment he saw her. Even from across the street, his ears perked up, eyes softening with recognition. Emily's anger faded. She crossed the street, kneeling to greet him. "Hey, big guy," she murmured, scratching under his chin. Atlas leaned into her touch, letting out a low, contented sigh. There was a patience in the way he waited for her, a loyalty so steady it quieted everything else. They walked home together, Emily talking softly about her day, Atlas listening, his ears flicking at the sound of her voice. He never judged, never laughed, he just walked beside her, step for step. When they got home, Emily found a note taped to the fridge. Her mom would be late again, picking up a double shift. Dishes crowded the sink, but Emily barely noticed. She grabbed a can of beans and heated it on the stove, dividing the food between herself and Atlas. Ethan hovered in the doorway, eyeing the dog with curiosity and a little less fear than before. After dinner, Emily sat on the worn rug trying to teach Atlas basic commands. She remembered something her dad used to say. Every dog wants a job, even if it's just fetching slippers. She knelt, holding out her palm. "Sit," she said quietly. Atlas stared, ears back, uncertain. For a long moment, nothing happened. Emily felt the weight of doubt settle in her stomach. Maybe she was asking too much, too soon. Maybe she wasn't good enough to help him heal. But then, as if he was reaching back into some long-lost memory, Atlas slowly lowered his haunches to the floor. Emily's breath caught. Ethan cheered from the doorway, clapping his hands. "He did it! See, Em? He's not a monster." Emily grinned, warmth blooming in her chest. "Good boy, Atlas," she whispered, offering a piece of bread as a reward. Atlas hesitated, then took it from her fingers, his eyes never leaving hers. Later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed and the TV flickered softly in the background, Emily sat cross-legged on the rug, Atlas at her side. She absently rubbed his scarred ear, her thoughts drifting. She felt a gentle touch on her shoulder and looked up to see Ms. Jensen, the school janitor, standing in the open doorway. Miss Jensen was older, gray hair always in a neat bun, her hands rough from years of cleaning. She crouched down, eyeing Atlas with the practiced patience of someone who'd seen plenty of broken things in her life. "He listens to you," Miss Jensen observed, her voice kind. "You ever think he might have been trained before? Some dogs, you can see it in their eyes. They're just waiting for someone to give them a chance." She handed Emily a faded pamphlet. "Service Dogs, Healing Through Companionship." Emily traced the cover with her thumb, her mind racing. Could Atlas have once belonged to someone? Was there more to his story than she knew? That night Emily couldn't sleep. She lay on her mattress, the pamphlet on her chest, her mind spinning with questions. Could she really help Atlas recover? Or was she fooling herself, just a kid from a broken family, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed? She turned to Atlas, who was curled beside her, his breathing deep and even. "Sit," she whispered. Atlas stirred, then slowly pushed himself up and sat, his gaze steady and trusting. Emily smiled, tears pricking her eyes. Maybe healing didn't happen all at once. Maybe it started with a single act of kindness, a hand held out in the dark, a word spoken softly, a dog who chose to listen. Maybe together they could become something more than the world expected. Outside, rain drummed softly on the roof. Emily drifted to sleep with Atlas at her side and hope settling quiet but strong in her heart. It rained the next morning, a steady gray drizzle that seeped into everything, the sagging steps of the trailer, the hollows under Emily's eyes, the very air Emily breathed. Inside, Atlas sat by the back door, staring out at puddles forming in the dirt, his tail unmoving, his body almost eerily still. Emily watched him as she spooned instant oatmeal into bowls, wondering how a dog could seem so far away while sitting right beside her. After breakfast, she knelt beside Atlas, stroking his matted fur with careful fingers. "You want to feel better, don't you?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. She decided today would be the day he got a bath, maybe not for him, but for her, to do something simple and good in a world that rarely offered either. The bathroom was tiny, barely big enough for Emily and Atlas both. She ran the faucet, testing the water's warmth with her wrist. Atlas tensed at the sound, but didn't bolt. Emily coaxed him closer with soft words, sliding the bathroom door shut behind them. As she knelt to lift him into the tub, Atlas's legs locked in panic, his claws scraping against the tile. "It's okay, boy," she said, voice trembling with determination. "You're safe, I promise." She used the sprayer gently, working the warm water through his fur. Pink-tinted water ran down the drain, swirling with mud, old blood, and the ghosts of a life spent outside. She talked to him the whole time about school, about Ethan's science project, about how she sometimes wished her dad would call. Atlas's muscles slowly relaxed under her hands, his breathing evening out. For the first time, he let her wash the dirt from around his ears, his flanks, the old wound on his shoulder. As she massaged shampoo into his coat, her fingers brushed against something hard near his ear, a small, faded tattoo, nearly lost beneath the hair. Emily blinked, then leaned in closer, gently parting the fur. The numbers and letters were barely legible. K9, 173. Her heart skipped. Military. She'd only seen marks like that in movies, not in real life. Her eyes traveled down to his collar, a rusted metal tag she'd never examined closely. It had been caked with mud and worry, just another part of his brokenness. Now, cleaned and shining beneath the spray, she could finally read the inscription, "Atlas, U.S. Army K9, do not separate." For a moment, Emily just stared, the world narrowing to the sound of her own breathing. Atlas. A war dog? She tried to imagine him in a world of sand and gunfire with men shouting and helicopters overhead. Was that what haunted his dreams? The missing piece to his story? Emily wrapped him in a towel, her mind racing. "You're a soldier," she whispered. Atlas looked up at her, his eyes impossibly deep, searching her face for understanding. She squeezed him tight, feeling her own burdens lighten, if only for a second. After drying him off, Emily ran into the living room, waving the tag like a flag. "Ethan, look!" Her brother's eyes widened as he read the words, lips moving silently. Is Atlas famous?" "I don't know," Emily said, "but I'm going to find out." The rest of the day turned into a mission. Emily and Ethan huddled by the old laptop, searching U.S. Army K9 Atlas and K9 173. Most of the results were grainy photos and stories about hero dogs. Emily's fingers trembled as she found a missing dog report from 2 years ago. Atlas, German Shepherd, disappeared during service, presumed dead after explosion. Last seen with handler Sergeant William Granger. "Is that our Atlas?" Ethan whispered, barely daring to believe. "Maybe," Emily said, her heart pounding. She looked at Atlas, who sat at her feet, head cocked. "But if it is, he's been through more than we could ever know." They spent the afternoon digging deeper, articles about PTSD and war dogs, testimonials from handlers about the loyalty and courage of their partners. Emily read one line over and over. "These dogs save lives, but when they come home, they carry scars you can't always see." Emily's throat tightened. She thought of the way Atlas jerked awake from his nightmares, the way he flinched from sudden noises, how he watched doors and windows as if waiting for trouble to burst through. That night, as rain hammered the roof, Emily typed out a careful email to the Army K9 unit she'd found in one of the articles. "My name is Emily Carter. I live in Willow Creek, Georgia. I think I have a missing war dog named Atlas. Please help me find out who he is and what he needs." She hit send before she could lose her nerve. Ethan, still buzzing with excitement, said, "What if they come for him, Em? What if they take him away?" Emily knelt beside Atlas, running her hand along his back. "Then we'll know the truth. And no matter what, he deserves a chance to heal." She looked Atlas in the eye, voice trembling with promise. "I'll help you, Atlas. I'll help you remember who you are." For the first time, Atlas leaned into her, pressing his weight against her chest, eyes closing in a trust so fragile it made her ache. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the storm and the soft, steady breathing of the dog beside her. She wondered if healing was ever really possible for souls so battered by the world, or if, by saving Atlas, she could finally save herself, too. As dawn crept through the blinds, Emily felt hope rising, quiet but fierce. Maybe there were answers out there. Maybe this was the start of something new, not just for Atlas, but for them all. The air in Willow Creek was thick with the promise of another storm. Emily barely noticed as she hurried through her after-school routine, glancing at the laptop every few minutes, hoping for a reply to her email. She fed Atlas, watched him circle his spot by the window, and whispered soft encouragements. "We're going to figure this out. You're safe now." Night crept in early. The streetlights outside the trailer cast pools of gold onto the wet pavement. Emily and Ethan played a quiet game of checkers at the kitchen table while Atlas dozed, his head resting on Emily's foot. The day's research and revelations hung between them, a mixture of excitement and dread. They knew something big had changed, but what came next was still a mystery. Suddenly, a sharp barking shattered the quiet. Atlas leapt up, every muscle tense, ears pricked toward the living room window. He barked again, louder, deeper, a sound Emily had never heard from him before. For a split second, she saw a flash of the war dog the articles had described, a protector awakened by danger. Emily followed his gaze, her heart racing. A strange, acrid smell drifted through the window, a hint of smoke. In the distance, shouts echoed, muffled by rain. "Emily!" Ethan's voice trembled. "What's happening?" Emily ran to the window, squinting through the rain-streaked glass. Across the street, the Joneses' house glowed an unnatural orange, flames licking hungrily at the siding. Smoke curled into the stormy sky, mixing with the rain in black, twisting clouds. The fire was spreading fast, too fast for the volunteer fire department to have arrived yet. Before Emily could process, Atlas was already at the door, pawing desperately. His body vibrated with urgency, as if old instincts were flooding back, erasing everything but the need to help. Emily yanked the door open, and Atlas shot into the night, disappearing into the chaos. "Atlas, wait!" Emily screamed, chasing after him. She barely remembered to tell Ethan, "Stay inside," before plunging into the storm. The world outside was all noise and color, sirens, shouts, the roar of flames. Neighbors ran back and forth, silhouetted in the firelight. Atlas bolted across the street, barking furiously, then skidded to a stop at the edge of the burning porch. Without hesitation, he lunged inside, swallowed by smoke. Emily's stomach dropped. "No, no, no," she whispered, hands clenched at her chest. But she didn't move, her feet rooted to the spot, terror and awe twisting inside her. Moments felt like hours. Then, through the smoke, she saw movement. Atlas emerged, dragging something, a small body, limp and pale, arms dangling. Gasps broke out from the crowd as Atlas pulled the Joneses' youngest, Lily, into the yard. Her mother ran forward, sobbing, scooping Lily into her arms. The girl coughed weakly, eyes fluttering open. Atlas collapsed at Emily's feet, panting, his fur singed and eyes rimmed with red. Emily dropped to her knees, sobs racking her chest. She stroked Atlas's face, whispering, "Good boy, you're a hero. You saved her." Tears mixed with soot on her cheeks. Atlas licked her hand, tail thumping feebly. The firefighters arrived in a blur of lights and hoses. Someone called out, "That dog! He pulled her out!" News crews showed up, snapping photos and asking questions. But Emily barely heard. Her whole world had narrowed to Atlas, his burned paws, the way he wheezed, the blood matting his fur. An EMT knelt beside them. "He needs help, now." Emily watched as they loaded Atlas into the back of a neighbor's truck, the only vehicle big enough to carry him to the emergency vet in town. The next few hours were a blur of fear and waiting. Emily sat in the vet's waiting room, Ethan clinging to her arm. The smell of antiseptic made her stomach turn. She prayed silently, bargaining with any power that would listen. "Please, let him be okay. He doesn't deserve to suffer anymore. He's saved enough lives. He's earned some peace." The vet came out, his face grave but gentle. "He's a tough one. Smoke inhalation, some burns, but he should pull through." You got yourself a real hero." Emily wept with relief, holding Ethan tight. They waited by Atlas's side long into the night, stroking his fur, whispering promises. "We're not going anywhere," Emily said. "You brought her back. We're going to bring you back too." By dawn, Atlas lifted his head, eyes bleary but alert. He licked Emily's hand, weak but alive. The town's first responders and soon after the local news stations called Atlas a miracle. To Emily, he was something quieter, proof that even the most broken hearts could become heroes, that courage could survive anything, even after the world tried its hardest to snuff it out. As the sun rose over Willow Creek, Emily knew things would never be the same. Atlas's scars were deeper than ever, but so was the trust between them, a bond forged by fire, loss, and a hope that refused to be extinguished. And as Emily watched him sleep, safe at last, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a fragile but stubborn belief that they might, together, be able to heal. Word about Atlas's heroic rescue spread through Willow Creek faster than the storm clouds that had haunted the town for days. By noon, his picture, soot-stained, eyes still wary but undeniably brave, appeared all over social media. News vans parked along the street, reporters knocking at the Carter trailer. Emily stood in the kitchen, phone buzzing with messages from classmates who'd once called her Dog Girl, but now wanted selfies with a hero. The chaos outside only made Emily more anxious. Atlas, still weak from his injuries, lay on a blanket by the window, flinching at every unfamiliar sound. He watched Emily's every move, drawing comfort from her presence. Ethan, thrilled by the attention, recounted the rescue to anyone who'd listen, pride brightening his face. By late afternoon, a knock at the door cut through the noise, a slow, deliberate rapping, different from the quick, nervous knocks of reporters. Emily peeked through the blinds. A stranger stood on the porch, tall and broad-shouldered, his face marked by scars that told their own silent stories. He wore a battered army jacket and clutched a worn photo in one hand. Emily's breath caught. Atlas's head shot up, ears straining. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between the door and her chest. She opened it a crack. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice cautious. The man's gaze softened as he spotted Atlas behind her. "I'm looking for a dog. Name's Atlas. His voice faltered, then steadied. "My name's Will Granger. Sergeant Will Granger." Emily's heart hammered. You know him?" The veteran nodded, holding up the photo. A much younger Atlas, ears proud, standing beside Granger in desert camouflage. "He was my partner. Afghanistan. He saved my life more times than I can count." Granger's voice broke for a moment. "There was an explosion. They told me he was lost. I've been looking for him ever since." At the sound of his voice, Atlas pushed himself up, unsteady but alert. His ears pricked, nose twitching as he caught the scent of his old handler. Suddenly, the tiredness melted from his body. He barked, a deep, low whine, almost a cry. Granger knelt, tears filling his eyes. "Atlas, is that really you, boy?" Atlas limped forward, tail thrashing, letting out a mournful, almost human wail. He pressed his head against Granger's chest. Granger wrapped his arms around the dog, hands shaking. "God, I thought you were gone," he whispered. "I thought I'd lost you forever." Emily and Ethan watched, awestruck. Emily felt something tighten in her chest, a strange blend of happiness, fear, and a deep, aching sadness. The bond between the soldier and his dog was clear, carved by years of shared danger and survival. For the first time, she wondered, where did Atlas really belong? Had she been just a chapter in his story, or was he now as much hers as she was his? Reporters clustered at the windows, snapping pictures of the reunion. The noise pressed in, but the world inside the trailer was hushed, just Atlas and Granger, time folding in on itself. After a long moment, Granger looked up at Emily, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I can't thank you enough. You saved him. You saved me, too." Emily shook her head, swallowing hard. "He saved me first." She sat on the floor, Atlas settling between her and Granger, looking back and forth as if unable to choose. They talked long into the evening. Granger told stories of Atlas's bravery, how he sniffed out explosives, saved lives, faced fire without hesitation. How, after the explosion that separated them, Granger woke in a hospital and demanded to know where his dog was, but got only silence. They said he was gone, probably dead. But I never stopped hoping, Granger admitted, voice raw. Emily shared what she knew, the nightmares, the flinching, the way Atlas seemed lost until he found her. He made us a family again, she said softly, surprising herself with how true it sounded. The conversation shifted, uncertainty gathering like another storm. I want to do what's best for him, Granger said, meeting Emily's eyes. But I see how he looks at you, how he leans on you for strength. He's changed. You both have. I'm not sure if I can ask him to come back with me. Emily stared at Atlas, who had laid his head in her lap. His tail thumped once, then again as Granger called his name. Atlas looked between them, two people he loved, two worlds that both needed him. The local sheriff arrived, gently shooing away reporters and reminding everyone that Atlas needed peace, not more chaos. The trailer felt crowded, neighbors dropping off casseroles, Monsieur. Jensen bringing flowers, everyone wanting to see the hero dog up close. Through it all, Atlas stayed close to Emily. Granger noticed a bittersweet smile on his face. He was always brave, but I've never seen him look so at home, he said. As darkness settled, Granger stood. I won't make any decisions tonight. He's earned the right to choose, and maybe this is where he belongs now. He looked at Emily, eyes shining. Thank you for loving him, for giving him a reason to fight. After Granger left, the trailer felt quiet again, but not empty. Emily sat beside Atlas, her hand resting on his scarred back. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew this. Whatever choice they made, it would be made together, out of love and out of the shadows of the past. And for the first time, Atlas slept soundly through the night, safe between two worlds that at last understood what it meant to lose and to be found. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight pouring through the trailer's windows as if it had never rained in Willow Creek at all. Emily woke to laughter outside, a sound she hadn't heard on her street in months. She pulled aside the curtains and blinked at the sight. Balloons, folding chairs, and the whole neighborhood spilling onto the front lawn. Atlas, still drowsy from his restless night, lifted his head, ears pricked. Ethan burst through the door, excitement bubbling in his voice. Em, it's for Atlas. The mayor's here. They're giving him a medal. Emily's heart skipped. For so long, they'd all tried to keep their heads down, to not attract attention. Now, everyone in Willow Creek wanted to celebrate the dog who had once been invisible. She helped Atlas up, careful with his healing burns, then grabbed his collar and straightened her own thrift store jacket. Together, they stepped into the sunlight. At the town square, the community center was packed. Flags waved from windows, cameras flashed. The mayor, Mr. Collins, who usually seemed far away behind a desk, stood at the podium. Today, we honor Atlas, who risked his life to save one of our own. His courage reminds us that sometimes the bravest hearts wear fur. The applause was thunderous. Emily blushed as she and Atlas made their way to the stage, feeling every eye in Willow Creek on them. Granger was there too, dressed in his old army jacket, standing a little apart from the crowd, but with a proud, almost fatherly smile. Emily's hands shook as she took the microphone, her voice wavering at first. I'm not good at speeches, she admitted, her cheeks red. But Atlas, he saved me before he ever saved anyone else. She looked out at the faces. Ms. Jensen, her mom, even Billy from school, all waiting for her next words. Sometimes, when you're lost or hurting, all it takes is one friend, one chance to change everything. That's what Atlas did for me. There was a quiet moment, then a wave of applause, and Emily had to blink back tears. The mayor pinned a shining medal to Atlas's collar, and Granger stepped forward, holding something in his hands. Atlas's old army insignia. You're his mission now, Emily, Granger said quietly, voice thick. He served his country. Now he serves you. Emily accepted the insignia, her fingers trembling. She saw something pass between Granger and Atlas: respect, gratitude, and a letting go that looked both painful and right. For the first time, she realized the past didn't have to be a chain. Sometimes it could be a bridge. Inspired by Atlas's story, the town council announced a new initiative, a fund to help retired service dogs find homes, medical care, and new purpose after their years of service. Ms. Jensen, never one for fanfare, pushed a donation jar into Emily's hands. "It's only right," she said. "Every dog deserves a family, even the broken ones." Neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid Atlas now stopped to pet him, slipping treats into his paws and sharing stories of dogs they'd loved and lost. For a brief moment, the line between hero and stray vanished, replaced by something brighter and warmer: community. Later that day, back at the trailer, Emily and Granger sat on the steps, watching Atlas nap in a patch of sun. Granger turned to her, his voice gentle. "The Army reached out. They offered to take Atlas back, maybe use him in therapy work for other veterans. It's a good thing, but—" He hesitated, searching Emily's face. "But I think he's found his purpose here." Emily felt a strange ache, pride and sadness tangled together. "What does love look like, Sergeant?" she asked. "Is it holding on or letting go?" Granger smiled, the lines around his eyes softening. "Love is knowing when someone needs you more than you need them. Atlas needs you, Emily. Maybe more than the Army ever did." That night, Emily sat by her window, watching the stars blink above Willow Creek. She thought about choices, her own, her mom's, Granger's, and Atlas's. She thought about the strange, twisting road that had brought them here, from a stormy fairground, through hunger and shame, into fire and hope. Ethan slipped in beside her, holding the medal. "You think he knows he's a hero?" he asked, eyes wide. Emily smiled, stroking Atlas's ear as he stirred in his sleep. "I think he just knows he's loved." As the town quieted, Emily understood the gift she'd been given. Atlas's journey wasn't just about surviving, it was about starting over, building something new out of everything that had been broken. Through his courage, he'd taught her how to trust again, and to believe in the second chances life sometimes offered, quietly, like a dog waiting in the rain. She closed her eyes, listening to Atlas's steady breath, the distant echo of applause, and the promise of a future built on hope, kindness, and the courage to begin again. And somewhere, deep in the quiet night, Atlas dreamed, not of war or fear, but of sunlight, open doors, and a family that finally, truly felt like home. The air in the Carter trailer felt different now, soft and golden as the late afternoon sun slanted through the faded curtains. The world outside had slowed, the fans spun lazily, carrying the scent of baking cornbread and summer grass. It was one of those rare days where nothing needed to be fixed or chased, just lived and noticed. Atlas sprawled across a sun-warmed patch of linoleum by the kitchen table, his breathing slow and peaceful. The scars that once stood out like warnings were now only quiet reminders, a gentle line above his eye, a bald spot on his flank. Even the deepest wounds had faded into the background, softened by time, care, and a place to belong. Emily sat at the table with her battered journal open, her fingers tracing the faded margin where, months ago, she'd scrawled fears in shaky handwriting. What happened to him? What's wrong with me? Now, those same margins were filled with doodles of Atlas's crooked ears, little hearts, lists of hopes and plans for the future. It was a day built from small moments. Ethan, who once called Atlas a monster, now kneeling quietly by his side, breaking his sandwich in half and offering it to the dog. Atlas sniffed the food, then accepted it with a gentle wag of his tail, a gesture so ordinary, yet so hard-won. Emily's mother, usually a blur of exhaustion and worry, sat down at the table, her phone face down, her eyes watching Atlas nap. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a real smile, softening the lines that had creased her face for years. After lunch, Emily washed dishes as her mom hummed. Ethan read comics on the floor, and Atlas stretched out in the sun. The house was quiet, but not with the brittle silence of sadness. This was a deep, living quiet, woven with the kind of comfort that comes only after surviving storms together. Later, as the day faded toward evening, the mail arrived with an envelope addressed to the Carter family from the Willow Creek Animal Shelter. Inside was a letter. Dear Carter family, because of your story, dozens of people have come forward to adopt and foster retired working dogs. You've started something beautiful. Enclosed is a donation certificate in Atlas's name for rescued dogs needing surgery. Thank you for showing us what second chances look like. Emily read the letter aloud, her voice trembling with pride. Ethan whooped, waving the certificate in the air. Their mom smiled at Emily and touched her hand. You did this, Em. You and Atlas. As dusk crept in, Emily sat by her bedroom window, the journal open in her lap. She watched the last light fade across the fields, Atlas curled up on her feet. She began to write, not about her fears, but about everything she'd learned from Atlas. Her pen scratched across the paper, slow and steady. Atlas showed me that healing isn't a sudden miracle. It's built day by day, in small acts of kindness. A gentle word, a soft touch, someone choosing not to give up on you, even when the world calls you broken. We're all scarred by something. Loss, fear, the feeling of being left behind. What matters isn't whether we carry wounds, but whether we let them close us off or open us up to love again. True transformation is rarely dramatic. Instead, it comes from patience, trust, and the courage to try again, even when the outcome is uncertain. She looked at Atlas's sleeping form. His scars would never completely disappear, nor would hers. But those marks weren't just signs of pain. They were proof of survival, of the strength it takes to keep loving the world when you've been hurt by it. Emily flipped back through her journal, past pages crowded with worry and loneliness, now filled with sketches, poems, hopes. She realized that Atlas had become the heart of her story, his journey from fear to belonging echoing her own. That night, Emily woke from a half-dream, the room still and dark. She felt Atlas press his nose gently against her hand, his breath steady and grounding. She wasn't alone. She wasn't running anymore. A few days later, the family gathered on the porch as the sun melted into the horizon. The evening was soft, the sky a slow swirl of pink and lavender. Atlas rested his head in Emily's lap, eyes half closed in contentment. Ethan leaned against the railing, humming a song he'd made up. Emily's mother joined them, finally free from her second job, her face lighter than Emily could remember. Emily looked at them all, her patched-up family, a little rough around the edges but real, whole in a way they hadn't been since her father left. Atlas yawned, then licked her hand, the gesture simple but full of meaning. She pressed her face into his fur and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up. On yourself. On me. On any of us." The porch filled with laughter and the soft, shared silences of people who have found their way through darkness together. Emily knew the world outside was still uncertain, still full of loss and struggle. But here, in this gentle light, they'd built something stronger than the storms. A home, made not from perfection, but from forgiveness, patience, and love. And as the sun slipped away, Emily felt for the first time in what felt like forever, that everything broken could someday be mended, one small, stubborn hope at a time. The summer air shimmered with excitement on Willow Creek's graduation day. Main Street was lined with wildflowers and sun-bleached flags, the little town's library steps transformed into a stage. Emily stood at the edge of the crowd in her cap and gown, fingers fidgeting with her tassel, heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Next to her, Atlas waited patiently, the medal and old army insignia gleaming on his collar, his calm presence grounding her. Families filled the square, parents beaming with pride, neighbors calling out congratulations, children tugging on their mothers' hands. The whole community had turned out, not just for the graduates, but for what had become the most anticipated part of the ceremony, the unveiling of the new bronze statue that now stood sentry at the heart of Willow Creek. The sun caught the statue's polished surface, throwing gold and copper shadows onto the brick. Atlas, ears alert, stood immortalized, one paw slightly lifted, eyes gentle but watchful. At the statue's base, the inscription read, "For the broken ones who save us all." Emily stared at it, her throat tight with emotion. For months she'd watched the sculptor work, sketching, casting, shaping the metal until the figure looked just like her atlas, scars and all. He wasn't perfect, and that was the point. Neither was anyone here, but he was loved, remembered, and honored for his courage. The mayor took the microphone, his voice strong. Today, we celebrate not just our young people's achievements, but the spirit that holds this town together, the willingness to see strength in brokenness, hope in second chances, and the courage to choose kindness again and again. He called Emily to the stage. She felt her knees wobble as she made her way forward, Atlas at her side, the crowd's applause washing over her. Her mom met her at the bottom of the steps, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You did something I never could, Emily," she whispered, voice thick with pride. "You gave all of us hope." Emily's eyes stung with tears as she reached the podium. All her life she'd been the quiet girl, the outsider, the one who rescued stray dogs and wrote secret poems in a battered journal. Now, for the first time, she stood in front of everyone she'd ever known, and her voice rang clear. "When I first saw Atlas, everyone told me he was broken." That word, broken, haunted both of us for a long time. But Atlas taught me something the world often forgets. Broken doesn't mean worthless. It means you've survived. It means you have the chance to help someone else heal. This dog saved a life, but he also saved me and my family by showing us that wounds can become wisdom, that scars can become symbols of strength, and that every person and animal deserves a second chance. If you ever feel left behind or not enough, remember Atlas. Remember that no one is too broken to matter. Sometimes it's the ones who've suffered most who have the most to give. She paused, meeting the gaze of Ms. Jensen, Granger, her mother, Ethan, and dozens of faces she'd once thought indifferent. She saw understanding, compassion, and a new kind of pride. After the ceremony, people lined up to lay flowers at the base of Atlas's statue. Daisies, wild roses, handmade thank you cards. The sheriff's wife knelt, tears in her eyes, sharing how her late husband's service dog had helped her through grief. Billy, the boy who used to tease Emily, clapped Atlas on the shoulder, awkward but sincere, and whispered, "Thanks for teaching us what matters." The Atlas Fund, started with spare change and a dream, now helped dozens of retired service dogs find homes. The library hosted a weekly Read with a Dog afternoon, children curled up with books and patient, gentle shepherds by their sides. The town itself seemed softer, people quicker to forgive, to look past scars and old mistakes. At home that night, Emily sat at the kitchen table, acceptance letter from the State University open beside her. She traced the bold print, Animal Therapy Program. She thought of all the dogs out there, waiting for their own second chances, and felt a deep sense of purpose settle in her chest. Her journal, once a vessel for pain, was now full of stories, of Atlas, of Willow Creek, of a world transformed by compassion. She glanced at her mother, who sat humming by the stove, and Ethan, who built a tower of dog biscuits on the floor, while Atlas watched, feigning indifference. Family dinners were loud now, arguments about chores, laughter spilling over about old jokes, plans for the future. The pain wasn't gone, but it no longer ran the show. Later, as the sun slipped below the horizon, Emily and Atlas walked to the statue. The crowd had dispersed, but the air still hummed with the day's energy. Emily knelt, resting her forehead against Atlas's, her fingers running along the warm bronze. She whispered, "We did it, buddy. We made it home." She stood and looked out at Willow Creek, the place that had once felt like a prison, now the cradle of every new hope she had. She knew there would always be wounds and storms and dark nights, but she also knew there would be love, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond between the broken and those who choose to see their beauty. As she walked home, the streetlights flickered on, lighting the way. Atlas trotted beside her, tail high, steps sure. Behind them, the statue glinted in the dusk, a forever reminder that brokenness isn't the end of a story, but the beginning of the most beautiful chapters. And for anyone who needed the reminder, Emily's words lingered. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Remember, Second chances can change the world, one broken heart at a time. Like and follow for more stories that prove every scar has a story worth telling.